Blessing was a woman who made men stop in their tracks. She was tall, elegant, and had a beauty that made heads turn wherever she went. But she knew the truth about men. Most of them wanted only one thing. She had learned it the hard way. She had trusted before, loved before, but every time, the men left her heartbroken, deceived, and used. Now, at 29, she wanted marriage. A man she could call her husband. A family of her own. But men were difficult to trust, so she set a rule. No man would sleep with her until he married her. If a man truly wanted her, he would have to propose, meet her family, and take her seriously. Many men came her way, but they all failed her test. She didn't care anymore. Instead, she decided to play their game, only better. One day, Blessing met Fred, a rich businessman who was used to getting whatever he wanted. He saw Blessing at a restaurant, approached her with confidence, and started a conversation. "I like you," he said with a smile. "I want to know you more." Blessing smirked. "You like me already? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Fred said, his eye scanning her face. "You're beautiful, and I want you to be mine." Blessing laughed inside. Another one. She decided to test him. She let him take her on expensive dates, buy her expensive gifts, and call her every night. But whenever he tried to get too close, she reminded him of her rule. "I don't sleep with men until they marry me." Fred laughed. "No problem. I respect that." He thought she would change her mind later. One day, Blessing called him, sounding weak and desperate. "Baby, I have a problem. I'm in the hospital. The doctor said I need to pay 300,000 Nigerian nairas for treatment." Fred was worried. "Which hospital?" "I'm coming now." No, baby," she said quickly. "I don't want you to see me like this. Just send the money." Fred hesitated for a moment, then sent it. An hour later, he went to a bar to meet a friend. And there she was, Blessing, laughing and drinking with her friends, looking perfectly fine. Fred clenched his fists. He walked up to her table. "I thought you were in the hospital," he said, his voice calm but dangerous. Blessing turned and smiled. "Oh, Fred. Don't be dramatic." Fred looked disappointed and angry, shaking his head, but there was nothing he could do, especially in public. He let out a deep sigh and muttered. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Another man, another lesson. Blessing had met good men too, men who genuinely wanted something serious. But she didn't believe them. Another man, another loss. Men started talking. They warned each other about her. Some blocked her number. Others ignored her. Blessing's beauty continued to draw men like bees to honey. They came in different shapes, tall, short, rich, middle class, smooth talkers, quiet ones, but in the end, they were all the same. At first, they would pretend to be serious, act like gentlemen, take her on fancy dates, buy her gifts, and promise her the world. But the moment she brought up marriage or asked them to meet her family, they started acting differently. Some changed the subject. Some laughed and said, "Let's not rush things." Others vanished completely, their calls and messages disappearing into thin air. It was always the same story. One day, she met Philip, a charming banker with a deep voice and a well-groomed beard. He took her to 5-star restaurants, bought her expensive perfumes, and even introduced her to his friends. Blessing liked him. She thought maybe, just maybe, he was different. 3 months into their relationship, she asked, "Where is this leading?" Philip smiled and sipped his drink. "Time will tell," my love. Let's enjoy the moment." Blessing's heart turned cold immediately. She had heard those words before. "Time will tell" was just another way of saying "I'm not serious." That night, she blocked his number and moved on. The men that came into her life all had one thing in common: they wanted to touch her. At first, they acted patient, pretending not to be in a hurry. But as soon as they got comfortable, they started making passes at her. Some tried to kiss her in the car. Some wanted to visit her house late at night. Some invited her to weekend getaways. Each time, she refused. "No man will touch me unless he proves himself." Many of them got frustrated and left. Some called her difficult. Others accused her of playing games. But she didn't care. She had been used before, and it would never happen again. Then came Daniel, a businessman who claimed he was looking for a wife. He showered her with attention, called her every morning and night, and even talked about their future together. Blessing thought he was the one. For 4 months, she waited for him to take the next step. But whenever she brought up marriage, he gave the same excuse. "Let's give it time." One evening, she looked at him and asked, "Daniel, do you really see a future with me?" He smiled. "Of course, baby. Then when are you meeting my family?" His smile disappeared. He looked away and laughed nervously. "Let's not rush, okay?" Blessing took a deep breath, grabbed her bag, and left. She had wasted enough time. The cycle continued. She met another man, 3 months, no commitment. She left. Another one, 2 months, same pattern. She left. And another. And another. Each time, she could already see where it was going. They wanted to cross her legs, but none wanted to build a life with her. She began to wonder, is there any man out there who truly wants to settle down? Her heart grew harder. She started feeling like marriage was just a dream. But deep down, she still hoped. Maybe, just maybe, one day, the right man would come. For years, she had tested men, played her own game, and refused to let any man touch her unless he was serious. Then, out of nowhere, she met Richard, the charming man who had just returned from Germany. Richard was different. He had a smooth voice, a nice smile, and a confidence that made Blessing's heart melt. Unlike the others, he didn't rush things at first. He listened to her stories. He called her morning and night. He made her feel special. For the first time in years, Blessing felt safe. After a few weeks, Richard invited her to his house for lunch. "I just want to spend time with you," he said. "Nothing more, I promise." Blessing refused at first. She knew how these things worked. But Richard kept pressing. "Just come, at least for lunch. I cooked." After days of pressure, she finally agreed. She went to his house, and they had a wonderful meal. He was gentle, polite, and fun to be with. But just as she was about to leave, he tried to touch her. Blessing pulled away immediately. "No. I told you my rule. If you want me, you must marry me." Richard smiled and leaned back. "I understand, but we need to know each other more first. Let's take our time." Blessing expected him to give up, just like the others. But Richard didn't. He looked determined. Less than 2 months later, Richard shocked her. "I'm ready," he said. "Let's meet your family." Blessing's heart nearly burst with joy. Finally! A real man. They traveled to her village together. Richard came with 2 elderly men and a woman, introducing them as his uncle, aunt, and elder brother. Everything seemed too perfect. He spoke with respect, smiled at everyone, and even knelt down to greet Blessing's mother. But her mother was worried. Later that evening, she called Blessing outside for a private talk. "My daughter, I'm happy for you, but this is happening too fast. How well do you know this man?" Blessing rolled her eyes and smiled. "Mummy, do you know how long I've been waiting for a serious man? Some women meet their husbands in 1 week. I have known Richard for almost 2 months. That's a long time in today's world." Her mother sighed. I hope you know what you're doing." Blessing didn't care. She had found her husband. Richard completed the introduction ceremony and paid her bride price. That night, Blessing felt like a queen. She had finally done it. After enduring heartbreaks and difficult relationships, she had kept herself strong, tested the men who came her way, and now, at last, she had found one who had proven himself worthy. For the first time in a long while, she allowed a man to touch her. That night, they had the most passionate moment. Blessing felt no guilt, no regret. After all, she was now a married woman, or so she thought. But the next morning, everything changed. Blessing woke up, stretching her arms with a smile. She reached for Richard, but the bed was empty. "Richard?" she called. Silence. She stood up and checked the bathroom. Empty. The wardrobe? Empty. His shoes? Gone. Confused, she walked to the living room. That's when she saw a piece of paper on the table. Her heart pounded as she picked it up. The moment she read the words, her body went cold. "You think you're smart? You didn't want to open your legs for any man? Now see. I have touched and crossed your legs. Nothing special is there." Blessing's hand shook. No. This must be a joke. She grabbed her phone and dialed Richard's number. Switched off. She called again. And again. Nothing. She ran outside, hoping to see him on the street. But he was long gone. It was then that the truth hit her like thunder. The whole marriage was a scam. The introduction, the family members, the bride price, everything was fake. And worst of all, Richard was not a stranger. He was one of the men she had played years ago, deceived, taken money from, and abandoned. But now, Richard was back for revenge. Back then, he had dreadlocks and a carefree attitude. Their communication was brief, and she never truly paid attention to his face. To her, he was just another man caught in her web. Now, he had changed. The dreadlocks were gone, giving him a completely new look. His style was refined, his confidence stronger. After moving to Germany and building himself up, he had returned with a plan. She didn't recognize him, and that was exactly what he wanted. He had planned everything. And now, he had gotten his revenge. Blessing sat on the floor, tears pouring from her eyes. She had spent years trying to outsmart men, only for the biggest trick to be played on her. She thought she was in control. But in the end, she had been played by someone even smarter. Ladies, let this be a lesson. Not every man is after your body. Some are truly serious, but if you keep being dramatic, you might push away the good ones. And by the time you realize your mistake, it could be too late. Not all that glitters is gold. Some men will pretend to be good just to destroy you. Choose wisely.